VK3QB. And a little bit in the vein of yesterday, I wanted to do a bit of an intro to contesting and make this as dynamic as you like, so fire away with questions. I'm by no means a highly competitive contester, but I enjoy it. I get up in 2 or 3 or 4 contests a year. I'm certainly not in the top 10, I'm probably not in the top 100, but that's not necessarily what contesting is all about. What I wanted to talk about today, a little bit like yesterday, is why get into contesting and how to get into contesting. So first question, who is a contester here? 1, 2, 3, okay, and who would like to do some contesting? Okay, a couple more hands go up, alright, so that's good. I've got handouts a little bit like yesterday. I'm going to use this one as a crutch, just to sort of help me along. So what is amateur radio contesting? For those of you that perhaps haven't experienced before or don't know what it's about, it's like any sort of competitive event. You get on air, you'll be aiming to have as many contacts as possible, and then of course the rules of the contest will govern your strategy and how you're going to play out over the 24, 48, 6 or however many hours the contest goes for. There are as many different contests as there are other interests in amateur radio. So there's low band contests, there's VHF, UHF contests, there's CW, RTTY, voice, digital contests. There's contests that go for 48 hours, there's contests that go for 1 hour. There's contests that you can do when you're out portable, and there's contests that you do at home. There are people, some of them you might know, who spend tens of thousands of dollars setting up really what amounts to almost a commercial quality radio station, and to be highly competitive in most of the worldwide contests, if you're not spending tens of thousands of dollars, you won't be winning them. And that's just the way so many things have gone in sport, hasn't it? Contesting is referred to as radio sport these days. And there's a few different categories. There's contesting, there's things like
ARDF.
Yep, ARDF. But really I'm just going to limit it to the contesting stuff today. So why might you get involved in contesting? Well, there's a few reasons. If you're competitive, particularly I know some of the local clubs, they have a contesting group within the club. You're going to compete with your mates, and that'll drive you to get a better radio station. Whatever that might mean. A better antenna, maybe a better receiver, better radio equipment.
Bigger amplifier.
Bigger amplifier. And I mean, look, that's an interesting point. There's a lot of Australians going in these international contests who are going in the high power category. Why would you go in the high power category in CW when you can only go from 100 to 120 watts with an amplifier? Why would you be spending $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 on an amplifier? These are all rhetorical questions for which I don't have the answer. But none of these people would be running a kilowatt on CW in contests, would they? And many people have been accused of running too much power in contests and on de-expeditions, but that can be the topic of another presentation. The other thing that perhaps I think is most relevant in contesting is that it encourages you to improve the one thing that money can't buy, and that's skills. And whenever I go in a contest, like the RD contest is my favourite. That's what got me into amateur radio in high school. My science teacher asked me to write a logging program on the VK3QB for the RD contest, and then he said, can you come along and keep the log for me? And I did that, and he had an FT101E and I was hooked. So the very next week I started on the novice syllabus. But I go in the RD contest most years and I'm competing with myself. Can I get a better score than last year? That's really who I'm competing with. And the sort of things I find are obviously band agility, being able to move around the bands is important. As Martin, VK7GN always says, you've got to have a comfortable chair. Because if you don't have a comfortable chair, you're not going to sit in it for the hours required. Something that always disappoints me, and it's just the fact of a local contest, we have triple points between 1 AM and 6 AM local time. I stayed up till 4:30 this year. I had 3 contacts in that time. It just wasn't worth it, but they were triple points. So, okay, I stayed up 3 hours, and I got 18 points. So there's that. But the big thing I think is you're building your skills. So whether you're into sideband, digital, CW, whatever your preferred mode is, by participating in contesting, the one thing that you can do every year and in between contests is work on your skills. And the big one, of course, is listening skills and working the pile-ups. And for anyone that's either been in a contest or listened to contesting, it can be quite intimidating and it can be quite overwhelming listening to these guys, you know, working the pile-ups and getting the numbers. And whether it's on REDI, CW, sideband, any of the modes, it is a definite skill, there's no question. So that's why to get into contesting.
Can I add one more to that, Chris?
Please.
Another good thing is if you're like me and a foundation cool and limited in power and you don't have the best antenna system in the world, during a contest, like for example in the CQ Worldwide just gone, it was amazing. I worked DX that I would never regularly work, so it's great from that aspect that you're worth points. They don't care if you're the weak signal, they'll work you anyway.
And that's another point, you know, everyone says, oh, I turned on the radio and the bands are dead. And you hear that all the time until it's a big contest weekend. And then all of a sudden the bands come alive and, you know, people say, oh, well, it's all the signals, they're generating, you know, all the ions and getting them active, and that's what's creating the propagation. Well, it could just be that there's actually, you know, 20,000 more people on air over a dedicated 48-hour period chasing contacts. So that generates a lot of activity, and as Tom says, it's absolutely right. If you're chasing awards like a DXCC, these contest weekends are just fantastic opportunities to add rare QSOs to your log. And as Roy said as well, great opportunity to test antennas, great opportunity to improve your Morse code, improve your RETI. You might not be interested in the contest, but it's a great way to get some activity in your log. It's a great way to test your station. Same goes, okay, I'm predominantly HF, I get nosebleeds going above 10 metres. But people who like 6 metres, 6 metre junkies, you know, what better than an activity weekend? The guys up on microwaves and even, you know, VHF and UHF. There's much more activity. You see people, they'll come to events like this, or they're on top of the mountain setting up their beams and their dishes and all the rest of it, and it's all that activity is being driven by contests.
So 1296 and 2.4, the only time I used to get contacts in the log basically was on VHF, UHF contest weekends.
Yep.
And you'd work stations all over the place. All of a sudden they could hear you and they'd turn the beams around.
Yep. You know, so a lot of people hate contests and they hate contesting weekends, and you see them on social media and the forums complaining that the bands have been ruined and these CW operators are going up 60 kilohertz above the bottom of the band and RITIs all over the place. Well, if they weren't there, the bands would be a pretty dead place a lot of the time. So they're, you know, generating a lot of activity and a lot of interest. And look, if you really don't like them that much, there's always the WARC bands. And it's a global unwritten rule in all the it's a written rule in all the contests that the WARC bands are off limits for contests. So if your licence conditions allow you to, you can go to 10, 18 and 24 megahertz for those weekends if you want to steer clear of contests.
Chris, when you're setting up, do you follow the any of the reverse beacons to find out where you ought to be operating, or it doesn't matter so much?
Well, sort of the where operating, as in the bands.
Yeah.
Yep. You'd also need to take into account the rules and the category you're going into, because there are assisted categories and unassisted categories. Depending on the rules of a particular contest, if you're using online spotting tools, for example, that may be against either the spirit or the rules of the contest. But otherwise, if it's permitted, the RBN is a great tool to sort of say, rightio, I think 20's open. I've dried up 40 metres, there's nothing more there. Or I want some multipliers. I'm going to go and put out a few CQs on 20 metres, and I mean, generally speaking, you'll know if the band's open if it's a big contest weekend. But am I being heard? I can go to the RBN and find out where I'm being heard around the world.
So also with the RBN, you can set it up to see who is hearing Oceania throughout the rest of the world, or who is hearing VK from the rest of the world. So in the recent RTTY contest, because I had to look for really strong signals before they were going to hear me. So I looked for who was hearing VK at a really strong rate around the world, got it up on the RBN map. There's actually a global map you can get up, and then I would actually go around and say, hey, can I hear this signal, and is it going to be strong enough that they can hear my weak RTTY signal, and give it a go, and have got contacts that way, absolutely, just by using the RBN, setting the RTTY mode and the bands that I wanted to listen on.
Yeah. So that's a little bit about why contesting. You know, if you find the other parts of the hobby are getting a bit dry or a bit boring for you, and you just want some more activity, you want to you know, compete with yourself and test yourself in your station, contesting is a wonderful way to focus the mind. I've got a contest coming up in 4 weeks. What do I need to do to get my station ready? What do I need to do? You get a bit of that, all right? I'll move on from Roy. So I've gone from having a contact that took me about 3 seconds with K3LR to my run rate has completely slowed down, but I've met this lovely fella and had a chat with him, and it didn't count because he didn't give me a number. Look, if he doesn't give me a number, chances are I know the rules. If the number is your CQ zone, well, just put that number in. If it's a serial number, put in 001. And if you're like me, you're in it more for the fun than anything. Well, if you get a few contacts scratched because your exchange wasn't right, I'm not going to get overly upset. So that's searching and pouncing, and that's